with me now, California Democratic Congresswoman Barbara Lee and Reverend William Barber II. He's president of Repairers of the Breach and co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign. Both the Reverend and Congresswoman Lee, along with Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, held a press conference this week where they unveiled a resolution pushing for a third reconstruction to tackle the issue of poverty and low wages, something President Biden's infrastructure plan is also trying to address. Congressman Lee, I'm going to start with you. The GOP refusing Biden's lower price tag on the proposed infrastructure bill, still demanding more cuts. What do you believe their goal is here?
Well, I believe that the Republicans' goal is to just not support anything that President Biden puts forward. I mean, come on, we need a bill to make sure that our infrastructure is addressed, but also our human infrastructure and making sure that people are able to get good paying union jobs. We need caregivers and the caregiving economy and caregiving industry in many respects. Caregivers deserve good paid union jobs. And so we need to understand and realize that I don't think, and especially just seeing this counter offer from the Republicans, or this offer from the Republicans, that they really are being themselves. They do not want to do anything for working people, for low-income people, for low-wage people. All they care about are millionaires and billionaires, and they'll do anything to try to stop President Biden from moving forward on this very bold plan. And we say it's got to be build back not only better, but it's got to build back bold.
You know, Representative, if I go back to your original point, which is that Republicans don't want to do anything that behooves the president, we also know Democrats met with a Senate parliamentarian on Thursday to discuss budget reconciliation. That's the process they use to pass Biden's COVID relief bill with zero Republican support, as you well know. Is there any sense that Democrats may have to resort to that to pass this infrastructure bill?
First, I know the president, I know the speaker, and I know that Senator Schumer want bipartisan support. But look, we've got to make sure that we look out for the people. People are suffering. They're living on the edge. And so whatever means necessary, you try. And I think the president is trying to work in a bipartisan way. But you have to have a backup plan, because these are people's lives that are at stake. People are living on the edge. They deserve better from their members of Congress, whether they're Republican, whether they're Democratic, or whether they're Green Party or independents.
Well, Bishop Barber, to the point that the representative just made about people living on the edge, some of the goals in this third reconstruction resolution can also be found in President Biden's infrastructure package, addressing economic justice, lifting people out of poverty. If Democrats manage to pass this plan through Congress, does that then adjust any of the goals you have in this third reconstruction proposal?
Well, when we met with the president's economic team with 32 poor and low-wealth people, economists, and lawyers, we pushed 14 areas that need to be done, and one of them was infrastructure, sure. We actually need a larger infrastructure bill, not a smaller one. And when you talk about what the Republicans are doing, they're negotiating on the back of poor and low-wealth people. You know, we don't have a scarcity of resources and a scarcity of solutions. We've got a scarcity of will. But there's one other thing, Alicia. The price of low poverty and low wealth is too high. We're talking about we lose $1 trillion a year from child poverty alone, $2 trillion from wage gaps. If we had raised the minimum wage to $15, it would have pumped $300+ billion into the economy. We've got 140 million poor and low-wealth people in this country, 43% of the country before COVID. 8 million more poor people went into poverty after COVID. Billionaires made $2 trillion. In the first, last year, we gave corporations and billionaires over $1 trillion, but poor people didn't get a wage. 400 families make $97,000 an hour, while 62 million people make less than $17 an hour. And you want to talk about death? 250,000 people were dying a year from poverty before COVID, 750 a day. The price is too high. So the real question is not the price tag, but what price do we pay if we don't address poverty and low wealth? And if we would invest in lifting the poor and others from the bottom, guess what? Good moral policy would be good economic policy. The Republicans, the way they're talking, would lead us into more hurt. What we need is the kind of investment that will lift from the bottom up. And that's what this third Reconstruction Omnibus vision says. If you're serious about poverty and low wealth and helping 43% of the nation and ending poverty, here's the roadmap for what must be done.
Congresswoman, I take the Reverend's point that this is not a question of need. This is a question of political will. We talk very often about the ways in which living through the pandemic have reshaped America's understanding of the interplay between government and in their day-to-day lives. Has the calculus changed when it comes to combating poverty?
I believe that it has. When you have 8 million more people living below the poverty line now, when you look at the food lines, I mean, remember seeing cars and cars lined up for baskets and boxes of food? Many of those individuals were middle income individuals, and they were struggling just to barely survive. Many were evicted. Many could not pay their bills. Many are still waiting for checks. And so, yes, we have to look now at how COVID has exacerbated the crisis, and more people are living now below the poverty line. So we absolutely have to pass not only the infrastructure bill, but our bill which lifts people out of poverty, because now you have more people living below the poverty line. And I think that really bodes well for, as Bishop Barber says, fusion coalitions. I think more people now will come together because they're feeling the pain just like so many people we know in our communities, Black and brown communities, poor white communities, communities all around the country, and our Native American communities have been living with all of their lives.
So, Bishop Barber, I mean, when I listen to all of that and when I listen to you lay out this plan, there are many parts of it. One of the parts of it has to do with voting rights. And I think there is an argument that we will hear people make that you cannot address any of these economic issues if voting rights are in play. Do you agree?
I certainly agree that there are 5 interlocking injustices: systemic racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation, denial of health care, and the war economy, and the false moral religious nationalism. And voting rights is key, because what we have found is the same people that fight and push voter suppression also vote against health care, also vote against living wages, also vote against unemployment, also vote against dealing with the climate. And so what you have is people use voter suppression to get the power to vote. And once they get the power of office, they protect the corporate elites, they protect the greedy, and they don't care for the very people. In fact, most so-called red states are the so-called poorest states. And a third of all poor people live in the South. A third of all poor white people live in the South. There's 66 million poor white people, poor low-wealth white people, 26 million poor low-wealth black people. I mean, this issue, as Congresswoman Lee said, forces us to come together. And you can't address one little piece here and one little piece there. We need a reconstruction, and it's for the very health and the soul. We cannot sustain 43% of this country living in poverty and low wealth before the pandemic, and after the pandemic, you've moved closer to 50% of people living in poverty and low wealth. Only 39% of this country can afford $1,000 emergency. Let's think about that in the midst of America. That's why your show is so important, Alicia. And as a clergy person, I'm so tired of this. I hear all these folk talking about politics, about morality and religion. Listen, the Bible says, woe unto those who legislate evil and rob the poor of their rights. Jesus said the poor is how a nation will be judged. And economists now tell us that a moral vision is a good economic vision. If you live from the bottom, guess what? Everybody benefits. But if the bottom is broken, the whole thing will fall apart. This omnibus vision that Barbara Lee and Jaya Paul and so many others have said, they are saying, here is the vision. Here's the resolve. It's not the answer, but it's what resolve we must have as a nation if we're going to truly be the American we say we are on paper.
Well, speaking of resolve, Congressman Lee, we're continuing to learn more about the latest incident of police brutality that resulted in the death of a black man, Ronald Green, in Louisiana after he was arrested back in 2019. As we approach the one-year anniversary of the police murder of George Floyd, at this critical moment, what strategy are Democrats looking toward to get the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act passed?
Yes, first of all, my heart is broken once again about the tragic murder of Ronald Green. We have got to have criminal justice reform, but we've got to have systemic also criminal justice reform, and really looking at how this incarceration, this mass incarceration has impacted black and brown people. But starting now, we need to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. And I know that our negotiators, Senator Booker, Senator Scott, Congresswoman Bass, they're working day and night to get this done. This is a must do. We can't wait anymore. I mean, more and more of these videos, more and more of these cases are going to come out in my own district of police misconduct. No one is above the law. And we've got to get a system where we have police reform so that black and brown people can feel safe, so that we have communities that don't have to worry about walking out of the door or driving down the street and getting stopped. And African-American men and women, it's gotten to the point where this is a national emergency. And so I'm hopeful that the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act passes. And again, this is just a first step. We've got to look at an entire system of criminal justice that needs reimagining, it needs reforming, and it needs to have public safety at its center in terms of all communities, because this can't go on much longer in this country, because there should be equal justice under the law, and no one is above the law, including police officers.
Reverend Barber, Representative Lee, thank you both.